Welcome back to the She Hit Refresh podcast, a podcast for women aged 30 and up who want to figure out and fast track their move abroad. I'm your host, Seppi, rhymes with Peppy. And yes, I am back in Spain, y'all. So back in Spain for the summer in my house here in Malaga. Before we dive in today, I just want to give a special thank you to our sponsor, International Living, for supporting this season of the podcast. So today we actually have a familiar face on the pod, and that is Marla Stein. She's originally from New York, and I actually met Marla through the She Hit Refresh Facebook group way back. I think that was in 2018. And at the time, she was teaching English in South Korea. So we go way back. Marla was a guest on the podcast in February 2022. And that was episode 41. So please check that out. She was on the podcast just a few months after she made her move to Valencia, Spain. And she moved, at the end of 2021. It's a really interesting episode, especially of that time. It was still, kind of pandemic-y time. So please do listen to see how that transition was. Now 53, Marla is here back on the pod to give us an update, a life update from the past 3 years and talk about a refresh that she never saw coming. So just a few months after that move to Spain, Marla received a rare cancer diagnosis that completely changed the course of her life abroad. In this episode, we're going to get into that, how she's navigating healthcare, what it's like to live abroad with a chronic illness, and how she's had to once again learn to find opportunity when faced with those hardships of life. She is also writing a memoir about overcoming adversity with grace and humor that we'll talk about as well. So let's dive in. Marla, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you, Seppi. Good to be here. It's been a minute.
So great to have you back. And in the intro, I did give a little insight into who you are, but can you remind our listeners who haven't heard the previous episode we did together, just a brief overview of what you did before you moved and why you moved to Spain?
As Seppi mentioned, we've known each other for about 7 years. And during that time and onward, I hit quite a few refreshes. At that time, as Seppi mentioned, I was in South Korea, taught English, left my world as a professional fundraiser because there wasn't any fun in fundraising anymore. And the landscape in the US definitely shifted in a direction that I personally did not feel comfortable being a part of. But during that last episode, which I hope everyone tunes into, I also talk a lot about the shifts and pivots I've had to take through the course of my life due to health challenges, unexpected family traumas and what have you. Also, the physical refreshes I've done. I left the US to move to South Korea. At a younger age, I lived in the Middle East. And during that time frame and path, I also set my sight on Spain. From about 2020, I believe, to 2021. It was all eyes on Spain, but then I also had to deal with another unexpected pivot, which was a global pandemic.
And so now you've been in Spain for 3 years.
3.5. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 3.5 years.
Yeah.
Can you catch us up on life? Like, what's life been like since we last heard from you on the pod?
Do we want the good stuff or do we want the challenging stuff? Should I just dive right in there?
Yes, I think people want to know. People want to know what's been going on, girl.
Absolutely. And before I get into it, full transparency, I really hope that my story will shed some hope and insight and light and brightness for people who really want to live their best lives, regardless of what crap is thrown their way. Long story short, or short story long, I moved to Spain. It was the end of 2021. It was just after Christmas. I remember that. And prior to leaving Spain, I wasn't feeling so great. As many people can hear, I sound congested, so that's kind of my norm. I really didn't think much about it. But within 3 months of moving to Spain, I had a cough that just would not quit, which led to me being diagnosed with the rare stage 4 cancer called neuroendocrine tumors, and they were based in my lungs. It is stage 4, but it is contained and it is stable. So that's the abridged version. As I mentioned, I had all eyes on Spain, and I really was thrown for a loop 3 months into arriving here, realizing that, what do I do? This really was not on my card. This wasn't on my vision board. I had already faced a lot of adversity prior to coming here. And this is not me throwing a pity party. This is just the reality of the cards that I've been dealt. So for the past 3+ years, it's really been navigating the Spanish healthcare system. It's been mentally and emotionally and physically processing the changes that have happened to my body in more ways than I care to count. And it's just been coming out the other side. Where I am right now on this journey, I won't say that I've reached acceptance, but I'm closer than ever to accepting the cards that I've been dealt. So that has been my reality. And honestly, I really believe it happened for a reason, because to segue into the reality of my situation, I'm in a country where, based on my situation, I'm getting amazing healthcare. I have support. I can still live a life where I can walk outside and feel safe, and I can enjoy fresh air, and I could eat healthier food, and I could afford to live here. So I count my blessings, even though my day-to-day is not what I thought it would be by any way, shape, or form.
Thank you so much for letting us know. And for those who didn't listen to the past episode, like, you have already overcome breast cancer. So for life to throw you this curveball, one is just very cruel, but as people can hear, like, I know this is very hard to go through, but you are also trying to bring humor to this, like trying to still have a strong spirit and live your best life here in Spain, despite what has happened.
I'm trying, and to be fully transparent, it's taken to literally where I am now. I would say the past few months, I've taken a shift in a very hopeful direction to really live and not just exist, because it's a lot to digest. Just realizing that when your body dictates your days, it's a mind-body struggle to figure out how to put one foot in front of the other. So every day has not been a good day by any means whatsoever. I have a couple of close friends here who have really helped scrape me off the floor, days that were really challenging. And I think, as listeners listen to this, I really want them to take this in, because even though the cards I've been dealt, let's be real, are pretty shitty, I really want people to know that there's still light at the end of the tunnel as far as trying to live and really wanting to live the best way that you can. Granted, I had no idea this was going to happen. Obviously, I'm not a freaking mind reader. I already dealt with, as you said, breast cancer at 32, where I had a bilateral mastectomy and witnessed the passing of both my brother and father. Again, not a pity party, but just perspective on really understanding how to overcome adversity. And I still say the glass is half full of shit, but it's still half full. That really is my motto that has kept me going. Otherwise, what choice do I have?
Definitely. Well, we're going to get into your perspective and your story more, because I'm sure listeners are like, okay, I want to hear what she has to say.
Talk some more.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about also just settling into Spain, like minus the health diagnosis. Like, you've been living in Spain now, as I mentioned, a few years. What has surprised you most about settling in?
How easy it's been. Moving to Spain hasn't been my first refresh. As I mentioned, in my 20s, I lived in the Middle East. 30s was health stuff. And then late 40s, I moved to South Korea. So I know what it's like to deal with the challenges of living in a new country. I understand the cultural differences. I have a background with a strong degree of cultural competence, and that's, just part of who I am as a person. So going to Spain with that lens on actually made the whole process feel pretty easy in a lot of ways. I did a lot of homework beforehand because I had the time. It was a pandemic. So, that's what you do. You sit online all day. So I did my diligence beforehand, and I prepped as much as possible, just learning some basic Spanish, definitely, YouTube videos and what have you. And just knew that, like, even when you go anywhere new, there's always going to be ups and downs and all arounds. But the easiness, by easiness, I mean, it was very easy, and it has been easy to build community. It's been easy to navigate the country. Touch wood, I've had lovely experiences with Spanish people, Except, a lot of times when I talk Spanish, people would respond to me and say, I don't understand English, but I'm talking to you in Spanish. Because I have such a heavy New York accent. I'm like, I'm working on it. Things like that. It's been pretty good in that regard. I was aware of Spanish bureaucracy, but I'm like, you know what, whatever. It's all good. You're a guest in another country. Just go with it. It'll all work out.
I'm glad you've had a positive experience in the sense of like settling in. Also, things that I mentioned on the podcast before is like moving abroad isn't going to solve all of our problems, right? It's not that every day abroad is going to be rainbows and sunshine, because life abroad is life, and life has its ups and downs. So wherever you are, there's going to be hard times. Some of those are in your control and some of those aren't. So I'm curious to know like what it was like going back to your diagnosis. What was it like, moving to Spain with all of these high hopes, starting your dream life, and to have this kind of setback from your diagnosis? Like, how did that feel and how did you deal with that?
It was devastating. It was absolutely devastating. And I don't want to get too emotional here. The hardest part for me was really, and she's going to listen to this and hear this, was I was worried about my mother. My mother lives in the southern part of the U.S. and is retired. She already lost her son, and had to tell my mother and my sister, my family's very small, they're what's left of my immediate family, how to tell them what was happening, knowing that there was absolutely nothing that they can do for me. They're like, do you want us to come there? You want us to go with me? Do you want to come with me to appointments? Blah, blah, blah. You don't speak Spanish. You're not going to be helpful. The number one thing I need to do as a cancer patient to this day is to manage my central nervous system. Having somebody in my space who can't speak the language is not going to help. That was the hardest part, is really dealing with them. Within me, I think I was a robot for a long time, not fully understanding what was happening. And to be honest, I think I'm first coming out of that fog now. It's been over 3 years, but I know other people that have had similar journeys as mine. One person told me 10 years, another person told me 4 years. It's all relative. Another thing I would have to say, while at the time I had my closest friend here, which I am so grateful for, she really was my ride or die through everything. And I had another couple good friends who really helped me navigate the system and go with me to doctor's appointments and what have you. I'll be honest, the entire experience was and still is a very lonely experience, because unless you're dealing with what I deal with every day, which, is chronic fatigue, aches and pains, lots of stomach issues, lots of unknowns, then no one's really going to fully understand what you're going through. Because the other thing I need to think about is my mortality. I don't have a terminal illness. I have a chronic illness. So I want to reiterate that. My time isn't up tomorrow, but the reality of it is I have to deal with this the rest of my life, whether it be 2 years, 10 years, 20 years, who the hell knows? So, a lot of what I've had to deal with and manage is just processing all of this and realizing, okay, this is definitely not the refresh I thought I would have. And in prepping for this interview, I was really thinking about it. What did I want to do before all this happened? Because I almost forgot, because my sense of self and my sense of identity has completely shifted. I'm not who I was, and I'll never be that person again. That's the reality of the cards that I've been dealt. And beforehand, I wanted to use Valencia as a base and be more nomadic. I was very clear about that prior, and I really saw myself living more of a nomadic lifestyle or a slow travel or what have you. But now I'm a homebody. It is what it is, and I'm learning to see what's beyond my home and see what else is going on in the world, and to try to get out there in a way that I can do it.
Thank you so much for sharing. After getting that diagnosis, did you ever consider moving back to the US, whether for treatment, for community, for just being in a country where you could speak the language at the doctor, for any reason?
Oh, my friend, don't ask questions where you know the answer. There's the sense of humor. No, and no. I tend to be a little wooey at times, and I'll own it. I really think my grandmother was with me throughout this process, and she's like, this unfortunately is going to be in your trajectory, but you will be in a country where you'll be taken care of. I really look at that as like a saving grace or whatever you want to call it, as a comfort. Going back to the U.S. was never, honestly, it's never crossed my mind for 3.5 years. It's never been on the cards. I will say that my mother came to visit me. The first time she came to visit, she went with me to my doctor's appointments to give herself peace of mind. My doctors are fluent in English, which I'm really grateful for. And she had peace of mind. She's like, yes, you're where you need to be. And I'm not even talking about the, what do you call it, as far as the cost of healthcare being more manageable and affordable here. The level of research in Europe is more advanced with the neuroendocrine tumors than it is in the U.S. as well. So the knowledge level is better, the follow-up is better, and the care I get has just been amazing. I'm really being very well taken care of.
So I'm sure people are really interested to hear about what your experience has been like accessing treatment in Spain. So if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. I am in the public healthcare system on a plan called Convenio Especial. And what that means is that I am treated like a Spanish person. I have access to the public healthcare system. And due to my diagnosis, straight away, I was able to get in and see essentially the top neuroendocrine tumor specialist in the country. There just happened to be two in one of the best public hospitals in Spain, just happens to be in Valencia. So I am beyond grateful that I have that care and that access. And my treatment consists of monthly injections, which are fully covered. If I lived in America, that would probably be about 10,000 USD per month. I get an injection every 28 days. And that is the general treatment plan that I'm on. But another perk of being a part of the public healthcare system in my situation, being very clear, this is my situation. Again, stage 4 cancer, a history of cancer in my family, previous breast cancer patient/survivor. My sister and my mother and my grandmother, who was adopted, also had breast cancer. So I'm adding all that because I was also pushed to go for genetic testing. I didn't even ask. They just did it for me. Oh, you had this appointment. Oh, let's follow up. Make sure you have your mammogram every month. I'm like, really? I still need them? I had them planned, But, my point being is that the thoroughness and the diligence on the public healthcare system based on my situation has been amazing. I have nothing but good things to say about it.
That's great. And then just to give people a cost comparison, because you said your treatment would be about $10,000 a month in the US, which is wild. What are you paying in Spain?
In Spain, I pay 60 euros a month. That is deducted from my Spanish bank account, so I don't have to do anything. How it works in the public system in Spain is you have a little card. I go to the pharmacy if I need additional medications or what have you. It's so nominal. Medicine to deal with my mental health challenges in the US would probably be about 50 USD a month. Here, it's 3 euros. That's just under $5. So perspective. And again, I am beyond grateful. I am not abusing the system. I am just lucky in a lot of ways that I happen to be dealing with this in Spain. That's really the silver lining.
Definitely. And you mentioned, so your doctors in the public system, they speak English, because that is incredible.
Yes, I got very lucky. I have a team. One is a endocrinologist and the other is the oncologist. So I have a team of both of them. And again, they're super thorough. Maybe it's because I live in a major city, but I do find that a lot of the doctors in the public system do speak English. I mean, my Spanish doesn't suck. I just have a really heavy American accent when I speak. So there's been times when, I've gone to maybe appointments with the primary where the conversation was in Spanish, and I get by just fine. A few times I've had a friend on standby on the phone, and they're like, why did you call me? You're doing fine by yourself. So it's been totally fine. And people are very nice. I really haven't had any problems.
It is something to think about, right? If you're talking to a doctor about something more complex, like if you're not just going in because you have a headache, but if you're like talking about a diagnosis, that you want to just make sure that you're able to understand what they're telling you, what your treatment plan is, and just making sure that you can follow along. So it's great to have a doctor that can speak English as well to explain those things.
Absolutely. And I unfortunately, I knew from previous experience, bring somebody with you. So, two of my closest friends, we would rotate and come with me to appointments. So I was very grateful that I had that as well.
Wonderful. And then how does your experience in Spain compare to the healthcare system in the US in terms of maybe ease, quality? We already talked about pricing, but just ease and quality.
Sure. Well, pricing, as I said, is just bar none. You really can't compare it. Ease, very easy. Just go on the app, make an appointment. For me, since I'm in the system because of the severity of my diagnosis, everything is pretty much done for me. So I'm very grateful. As I said, I get notices, oh, you have an appointment with a genetic counselor. And I want to keep reiterating this. I really think it's because of the severity of my diagnosis that I am whisked right in a lot of times. I know I've heard stories people have to wait months or even years for appointments. So I understand that and I respect that. That is other people's experience. But for me, it's been pretty seamless.
Great. And this question has come up. I've seen this before of refreshers, being concerned, that they have a chronic illness and they feel like they may not be able to move abroad because of it, or they're just hesitant to navigate treatment in a foreign country. From your experience, what advice would you give them?
Again, I was diagnosed with a chronic illness once moving here, but my understanding and speaking with other people who have had illnesses for years and years, they were still able to make the move here by just being super transparent. In a lot of cases, that would probably, again, I'm not an expert, that would probably mean that the insurance company would not cover for those certain issues, but would still allow you to come to the country and you would have to pay out of pocket for whatever that issue might be. I respect that doing something like that is contingent on a person's financial situation, but my point being is when there's a will, there's a way. And once you're here, in my situation, the healthcare is better, again, for the treatment that I am getting and Spain's understanding of neuroendocrine tumors. That, in a way, I hope would maybe make people feel hopeful, knowing that not even the quality of care, but the understanding of treatment and of disease in some situations can be better than what they're getting in America.
That's a great point. Yeah, I think we definitely have refreshers with chronic illnesses abroad. And I would say for anyone who has an illness and they're moving abroad, the things that you need to do is number one is to probably talk to an insurance broker, because to move to any country for your visa, it's going to be required to get private health insurance. You're not going to be able to access the public health care right away in most countries. And private healthcare providers, as Marla said, may or may not cover you. So I would suggest speaking to maybe a health insurance broker for the country you're going to, because they can advise you about how to go about that. So you need to first see if you can get coverage, but also see if there's a treatment that you need in the country you're going to. That's really important as well. So even if you're covered, if there's not the right treatment for you to maintain your quality of life, then maybe that's not going to be a country that you should be moving to. So do your research beforehand, before making that move, if you do have a pre-existing condition that requires some special treatment.
Absolutely.
So let's talk a bit about how living in Spain and not the US anymore, how that's impacted your relationship with your body, wellness, and even pace of life.
The first thing, I can go outside and I feel safe. I don't feel like I'm going to be shot. I'm being very serious here. I was in and out of the US pretty much for the past 8 years. During the time I was there, my anxiety was definitely through the roof when it came to mass shootings. I'm not going to lie. It's definitely an issue for me. My priority in life right now is really managing my central nervous system, because that's one of the few things I have control over. So it means getting a lot of rest and keeping my anxiety and stress low. So living in Spain has been a gift in that regard, as far as feeling safe. And of course, living in Valencia, where there's over 300 days of sunshine a year, that's a huge win to motivate me to go outside. That has been a win. I'm eating healthier-ish. I add the ish because I'm not going to sugarcoat it here. I have an addiction to bread. I have an addiction to bread and to carbs. And when you're depressed or stressed or whatever, I go for comfort food. It's definitely, a bit of ongoing struggle, but even if I go for my vices, they're still healthier. The bread is not made with preservatives, things like that. My weight has been stable, which is a good thing, because a big concern with people with neuroendocrine tumors is lack of appetite. There have been times where I wanted to eat, but I just couldn't eat because it hurt too much. Being in the public system, that's something that was brought to the attention of my doctors. And straight away, okay, we believe you, have some medicine. So my doctors believe in me. They've done their diligence as far as making sure, like, when I had stomach issues, okay, we're going to send you to a specialist. There's never been any pushback from my doctors regarding what I need. So that's been another thing that's helped me manage my body.
You had mentioned to me that in its own way, navigating life with a chronic illness abroad has kind of been like its own refresh. Like this is a refresh you weren't really expecting. And you had mentioned to me, like, there's just been many, like you've experienced many parallels, with the refresh of your health diagnosis to your journey of moving abroad. So can you explain a little bit more, like, what are those parallels of the diagnosis and moving abroad? I'm really curious to hear.
For me, dealing with cancer, I don't want to hear it anymore. That's all you talk about. Essentially being gaslit and being shut down for the experience that you're going through. So for me, I think, being questioned of your choices to move abroad or what have you, versus me being gaslit in a way, being told like all you talk about is being sick. I'm like, you know what? I live in a foreign country. Well, while I have friends, my inner circle is not physically in my realm. So if I don't talk to you on a regular basis and I want to talk about it, if you're a good friend, you need to ride the wave with me. So that is one parallel I think that refreshers might go through in a lot of ways. Another is just reinvention. Reinvention. When you hit refresh in a traditional sense, you have the power to be whoever you want to be. I think that's a pretty awesome thing. When I left the US in 2017 to teach Korea, I was in my late 40s. I must have been like 47, 48. And I was one of the oldest teachers in the private academy that I taught in Korea. And culturally, for those of you that are familiar with a lot of Asian cultures, age is a big thing. But I was in a culture where older was a little weird because the private academy bosses and what have you don't like having teachers older than the boss. So my point being there, I had to reinvent myself. I had to show that I was personable. I had to show that I was fun. I had to show that I was a good teacher. The reinvention that I'm going through now, which again, it's taken me over 3 years to get where I am right now. And I'm really proud of myself because, as I mentioned, I know people where it's taken them close to 10 years to get to this point on their journey, and everybody's different, but I'm proud that I'm where I am right now. So the reinvention I'm going through right now has just been really allowing myself to be quiet, because now I have a better understanding of what's happening in my body after all my appointments. After 3 years, you have a hang of like what to do when you're going to be triggered, blah, blah, blah. But the same thing holds true in both regards. I'm reinventing myself right now because the life I thought I was going to have doesn't exist. And figuring out what it might be like moving forward really entails me being quiet to gain that clarity and to be able to see who I want to be moving forward in life. And I know when I hit refresh in a very traditional sense, and I actually remember this from the retreat I went on. So was the second, did she hit refresh retreat?
It was the second one. Yeah. So just for the listeners who don't know, pre-pandemic, we did 2 retreats to Morocco, and Marla was on the second one that we did, which was in 2019. And that was a retreat for women who wanted to move abroad to get together. We went to Morocco and had a fun time there.
Actually, that was 2020.
Sorry, that was 2020. Yes, as I said that.
I was like, wait a second. That was a wild week.
Yeah. So actually there's retreat and we do have an episode, a recap about this. This retreat was March 2020 and we were in Morocco the week that the world shut down. So that was a whole wild week, but Marla was there.
Yes. Yes. So aside from dealing with a global pandemic during that time, I remember doing an exercise where we really focused on clarity. And the whole idea of clarity is something that I would assume other refreshers go through too, just to really see who you are, where you want to be, reevaluating what your values are. I pride myself on being a minimalist, maybe now not so much because I'm more stationary. But, that whole idea of clarity is something I'm going through right now with my health. Like, okay, I understand my stomach's going to bother me a few days after my injection. I understand now that, okay, only 5 tumors showed up on my last scan. Like, seriously, that's a good thing. So understanding and having that clarity is really important, and it's very parallel because it's going to help me figure out how to move forward.
And I'm assuming some of this that we're talking about maybe is in this memoir that you're writing.
Yeah. So my pivot right now / refresh is really tapping into my creativity, because refresh in the traditional sense is not on the cards for me, nor do I want it to be at this point. For the past about 2 years, I've been mulling around and I have a first iteration of a memoir about overcoming adversity with grace and humor. I have no idea what the title is. Maybe that'll be the title. I don't know. But the purpose of the memoir, obviously, is part of my healing journey, just really putting my thoughts into words. But the second part of me is really having it be a teachable memoir where there are takeaways that the reader can really apply to their own situations. A lot of this stems from me being someone who wanted to save the world. Now I just want to save myself type of thing. I still have the zest for creating some impact in the world. I realize taking it to a very personal level is really where I can have the most impact, because that's the little bit of control that I do have. Like, my story about overcoming adversity is really something that I know will have impact. I'm going to have a little bragging moment. I participated in a writing workshop 2 years ago through a very reputable publisher, and the feedback that I got was that I have something to tell. So that's my motivation to keep going. I am just coming out of the fog. I had writer's block for a few months, but now I'm back on the wagon. And one day I hope refreshers might enjoy reading it.
I'm sure we will. You definitely have something to share. My next question is one I actually don't know that I've asked anyone this season yet. So,
Okay.
what has moving abroad taught you about yourself?
Honestly, I think the big thing is that I'm more adaptable than I thought I was. I think my ability to adapt, and I won't say go with the flow, because that is so not who I am. I'm a work in progress in that arena, but definitely adaptability as far as like, okay, you've been thrown quite a few curveballs in the past 3.5 years, but I'm still here. How am I still here? Because I was able to adapt through the ups and downs and the roller coaster that I've been on. So I definitely think that's one of my biggest takeaways. And if I really think about it, I'm proud of that, because, again, I'm still here.
Incredible. Adaptability. That is such a great one. And I think it's necessary when you're abroad, because life's going to throw you all kinds of curveballs. So just being able to roll with the punches, or like you said, adapt to them. Not everything is in our control, and we can't know what's waiting for us around the corner. So
Absolutely.
it's a great one. What is next for you? Other than the memoir, what are some of the things, like plans that you have or dreams that you have or things that you still want to do while you're here in Spain?
I think I'll continue with the whole theme of adaptability, because what I've learned is that I can still do what I want to do. It just might look a little different. For example, my vision and my previous experience traveling for longer periods of time is not on the cards for now. Maybe one day it will be, because a lot of that is I have an appointment every 28 days, and which I'm sure I can work out if I needed to. And my energy and my triggers around coughs and what have you are still not fully under control. But I think in the future, and I know in the future because I've been able to do it the past year, it's more travel, but it's going one place, using that as a base, and then maybe taking a day trip here and there, just so I have access to taking a nap. Or, I'm beyond grateful that I live in a country where there's no judgment in taking naps in the middle of the day. Okay, there's a reason this happened in Spain, right? Just really learning how to live my life in a way that it could be as full as it can be, considering the cards I've been dealt. I've learned, honestly, having goals can also be a setup for failure in some ways. While I'm physically stable, I'm still very vulnerable as far as not wanting to let myself down. Not in a bad way, just in a realistic way.
Well, you know yourself, right? So that's
Yeah.
when you have that self-awareness. It helps you make more choices that are in alignment with who you are, how you want to live, and what pressures you do or don't want to have.
Exactly.
You gave advice for people who maybe are a little bit hesitant to move abroad with a chronic illness, but just in general, because I feel like you do have a lot of wisdom just from your life experience. Any words of wisdom that you would like to share with our listeners who are thinking about moving abroad and maybe just feel a little bit scared, or maybe feel like they're too old or it's too late?
I would say really pause and give yourself the space to think to have that clarity. A lot of times when people have that hesitation or the limited beliefs around doing something, it's just that. It's a belief. Belief doesn't mean it's true. Belief is a thought that you have from whatever that experience might be. So I would really encourage those that may be apprehensive to really think beyond. Maybe it's doing therapy to like challenge yourself to understand why you have that fear. Maybe it's writing. Maybe it's becoming more of a minimalist. Maybe it's going on a retreat. I don't know. But don't stop at, I'm too scared to do it, or the language, I will never do it, or I can't do that. So many people have said to me, I can't believe how you've done X, Y, and Z. You're so brave. I'm like, this is just who I am. I don't know how to respond to that. I'm like, I've always been this way. When I was making this move to Spain, my mother was upset that I was still in the US because my whole visa process was delayed because of COVID. Not because I was going, but because I was still there, because she knew this is who I am. Like, just off you go live your life. But I really encourage listeners to think beyond the white noise that's in your head. Think of a way for you to get clarity to realize you can do it. And you're not too old. Yeah, please. Age really is just a number. Trust me on that one. I know I look like I'm 12, but I'm actually 53. So there's gray up here. Yeah. So I really encourage people, dial more into She Hit Refresh. I mean, it's a wealth of information, and just really tap into other people's stories. Look at the examples for inspiration that work best for your situation.
Well, Marla, thank you so much for being back on the pod and giving us a life update. I really appreciate it and wish you all the best of luck.
Thanks for having me, Seppi.
Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed this episode and leave feeling like a move abroad is even more possible for you. If you're happy with what you saw, I want to invite you to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and leave a question or comment because I would love to hear from you. If you're ready to take action on your dream to move abroad, be sure to grab my Visa Guide to Europe. It's your roadmap to over 50 viable visa options in 19 countries. You can grab the link below in the show notes. And don't forget to get on the wait list for my next Move Abroad After 30 Masterclass, a masterclass for women age 30 and up, which is a step-by-step training to help you fast track your move abroad. And grab the link in the show notes as well. And last but not least, a huge shout out to our sponsor, International Living. Thank you so much for making this season possible. Until next time, ciao for now.